Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange, and it is an absolute pleasure to have my good buddy, my pal, Anthony Nocentino, in studio today and at HQ and talking about one of my favorite things, which is
Databases.
databases.
Yes.
You know what my second favorite thing is?
Databases.
Databases.
Right.
My third?
Well, there's three explanation points, so it's got to be databases.
It's all databases.
Right.
No, but seriously, really important topic, and you're one of our prominent speakers around that. Spend a lot of your time traveling around, talking to customers, writing blogs, doing great things, and you've been involved in it for a long, long time. Why don't you remind the people... Well, I have been doing this for a long time. I mean, look at all this stuff.
Yeah, right. It's all right here.
Yeah, yours is on the side. Mine's everywhere here.
No, it's creeping up. So
it happens. Get ready. But you started out as a practitioner. Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you were in the weeds.
Yeah, I think IT career started in 2000, right? You know, I was changing keyboards and things like that back then. That whole Y2K thing was hot for a minute.
Yeah, what happened with that?
I don't know, nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
And so I quickly learned that desktop support wasn't my jam. I crawled into a data center, stumbled over a database server, and 25 years later, I'm working on them every day.
How do you stumble over a database? Like, did somebody push you into one, or did you just get database curious and kind of jump in?
Yes, DB curious.
DB
for sure.
curious.
So what was happening at the time, I was writing software for a cardiology group in Chicago, and I had to stick data in a database server, right? Because as a software writer, and then I had to get it back out, and I was like, wow, that's kind of slow. And I went from there. And as we've discussed before, kind of my academic background in computing, kind of classically trained computer scientist, and I found database systems really kind of encompassed like all of computer science, theory, application, systems, and it's been a fun journey. So I found my happy place in the data center.
How do you learn about it at that time, right? I mean, obviously you took some computer science things, but once you were bitten by the bug, see what I did there?
I see.
Yes.
Wait, was that a dig at my software writing career?
Come on. Oh, yeah, that's why you migrated. But what was it's not like there's a lot of online modules at that time where you can just go search really quick.
Sure.
It's just database for dummies kind of books and
again,
like
at that time, here we are.
I know.
It's like another right hook at the H.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm a self starter, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we're self-learner.
So,
like
back when there used to be these things called bookstores,
okay.
I'd walk into them and they'd have books, and I read a lot of books. Yeah. But I also, I think it was 2014, I went to a training class of a company called SQL Skills, which is run by Paul Randall and Kimberly Tripp, and really just built a good relationship with them. And they were on the product team at Microsoft, and they became trainers and just good friends and mentors over the years. And it really helped me dig deep into technology.
And worth mentioning, you've been tight in that community for a long time, right?
Yes.
In the Microsoft and the SQL community, multiple year MVP and all that. So there's some great credibility, which is why we love having you come out. I mean, a lot of people have people going out talking about storage that are storage people, and we're always blessed to have people who are technologists that come from the database world or come from the AI space or from the virtualization space, because you can connect and make those connections with infrastructure people.
Yeah, in fact, I ran into Pure Storage when I was doing consulting before I came to Pure. So you're saying as a practitioner, I was out in my customer base, and I ran into a Pure Storage array in a data center in 2015 that my good friend Argenis Fernandez was involved in.
Oh, good old Argenis, right?
And so he moved the workload over onto a Pure Storage array. Storage is no longer the bottleneck. Had to come back on Monday and learn how to apply some troubleshooting techniques to my CPUs that were at capacity at the time, because we blew past the traditional bottleneck of storage. And so I've been a fan ever since. I actually studied data placement on SSDs in grad school. So that's another reason that brought me kind of into this industry, in kind of applying kind of both my professional and academic sides of my career at Pure.
It's always fun when you get to work with solutions that move the bottleneck, right?
Ooh.
When I used to work at a server vendor, there was something we did really, really well, and we pushed the bottleneck into networking or into storage, and customers would get frustrated and went, well, we did our job.
Right.
You know, we did what we said we were supposed to do. It's just a byproduct of something that's really efficient. And so
100%.
you saw that with that Pure array with Argenis.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about something a little bit later. I think we have in the outline here about moving the bottleneck even further.
Yes,
right?
I'm excited to get to that. Well, let's do a quick recap and I look back on Accelerate, right?
Okay.
So for folks tuning in, or if you're less familiar with Pure, we have our big customer and user event in June, and you were up in the breakouts doing
Yes.
some really exciting things. SQL Server
Yep.
2025, some of the AI features, let's say, or capabilities that are weaving their way into databases,
Right.
which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
What was it like presenting those at Accelerate, and what kind of responses did you get from the attendees?
Fantastic. I don't
Yeah.
know. You tell me what were the reviews,
Yeah, we're
right?
still compiling them here,
Yeah.
literally.
No, I think honestly, two of my favorite sessions I've done at Accelerate. One, I got to present with a good friend of mine and coworker, Ryan Arsenal.
Oh
Right, we
yeah.
covered enterprise AI,
Mhm.
what it really looks like in day two.
Yeah.
Right, performance tuning, data placement optimization. We covered a lot of different things, snapshots, and how they can be applied to AI workloads in enterprise relational databases. And then we had another session on kind of SQL Server 2025 and how
Mhm.
that marries well together with Pure Storage's capabilities.
Well, and you still also are very fond of just talking about general foundational capabilities in
Right.
database as well. And again, it's no secret to people that have watched the show or listened to the show that I started out doing database
Right.
marketing. And so it's really fun to see. I know you don't always present from slides. I feel like
Right.
the Dos Equis guy. I don't always present from slides,
But when
but
I
when I
do,
do, there is one that has been relatively stable for years. And I may have designed it originally.
was that you that did that
I
one?
think
Oh,
so. I think so. And maybe it's evolved a little bit, but not
sure.
much. But all those same hallmarks are still
Yes.
there. There's a data reduction and there's the sub-millisecond latency,
Right.
which leads to fast response times,
Right.
which keeps these people who are running apps really happy and
Exactly
not
that.
making phone calls to blame the DBA who then asks about storage. Like there's just so many good
Yep.
hallmarks that you also get to speak about frequently as well.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, we're not supposed to talk about speeds and feeds, but we talk about in terms of like solutioning for our customers, right? But when we talk about that in the context of database systems, quite literally, the milliseconds and microseconds matter
Yeah.
because how fast the business can move forward in time, right? We talk a bunch about the simplicity, right? Not having to worry about complex configurations. It's just I provision some storage, my database goes as fast as it possibly can. And then obviously the whole NDU story, really kind of
It's amazing. Right.
decoupling storage operations and database operations from each other. Like we don't have to ask for downtime,
Yeah.
right? And that's very important to a business that's 24/7, right? That wants to be able to get through their operations without having to take downtime, migrations, the whole thing, right?
Well, that impacts the people too, right? I mean, I've told the story
Oh yeah,
millions of times about the DBA at Microsoft show in 2018 who just said, we installed Pure and I have 8 weekends back with my family because of the way you guys built your architecture.
exactly that.
And that's huge. So great. We've hit kind of the foundational, kind of a look back at Accelerate, which
Yep.
is great. So let's get into what we're going to really dig into today,
Mhm.
which, I have here in my notes that's kind of fancy as from foundational support. We're just on
Okay.
foundational. See what I did there?
Mhm.
To operational freedom.
Okay.
And what that implies is that there's some things that are challenging still, right? I mean, we do a lot of great things at the storage layer,
Right.
but databases keep evolving, new features come in, new capabilities come in,
Right.
and so we still see DBAs as being challenged. And these are the people you talk to. So,
Yep.
what are they running into most? And maybe it's not them personally, but
Sure.
maybe it's the way the environment
Yeah.
is behaving.
So there's a couple trends, I guess you could say, that
Yeah.
I'm tracking pretty closely. Number one, we're seeing a huge shift in kind of the right placement of workloads.
Okay.
Right. We spent the last 10 years, every enterprise and most companies just running straight into the cloud. And then a couple things happened, right? They had availability challenges potentially. They had performance challenges. They had certainly when they slide the bill across the table. You're like, oh, that hurts, right?
Dollar
Yeah.
signs.
So
Yeah. Right.
help kind of cost optimize and performance optimize and place the workloads in the right places.
Yeah.
We're having bunches of conversations around that right now. I think with some of the performance capabilities that we have for databases, and we talk about sub-millisecond, we're looking at hundreds of microseconds in latency. That provides a lot of value to a business, and that doesn't exist in most clouds, right? And I think the other trend I'm tracking a lot is just kind of the proliferation of data stores, right? Application architects are sticking data in many different places. They aren't just sticking them in relational databases like they have been for the last 30, 40 years. We have data lakes and Parquet files and Delta lakes, all these different things that we have for different types of data stores. And that's just making kind of the challenges that the everyday database practitioner has to work, the surface area have to worry about, just massive, right?
Well, yeah, and where do you go to find it, and do you know it's even there? And
Ooh, data governance.
and I think the analogy that I get to is if you think back to let's think about photographs, right?
Mhm.
If I go to my parents' house, there's photographs are all in one place. There's just a bunch of photo albums,
Right.
right?
Shoeboxes,
Yeah,
right?
shoeboxes and albums and things until digital came along, and then you have digital, and we were talking before the episode too. There's this really kind of weird crossover point, right? Think back,
Right.
if you're of the right age, to when you got your first digital camera,
2003.
and then how much film did you actually process, and how many hard photos do you actually have now? Not very many
When I was
from that point,
when I
right?
was interesting sidebar and
Yeah, yeah,
coincidence
yeah.
actually. When I was driving to the airport to come to HQ, they were talking about how the size of Kodak, number of employees, went from hundreds of thousands to thousands
Yeah.
because of that digital revolution you just
Just like
described.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, just like that. And so a big change. But the analogy really, that was what I was thinking of, is just, well, I don't know where those things are past a certain point, and I've got them in this app that's backing up, and that app that's
Oh yeah.
backing up, and then I've got hard photos from from college and things like that. And so same thing's going on with the data. There's just more places where it can reside now, and you're trying to just figure out where it needs to go and kind of stuff it,
Right.
where there's actually space.
Yeah, and I think that problem domain is still unsolved, but techniques are popping up to make that more approachable and easier, right? So
Yeah,
like tags and data governance, things like that are
it
being
helps.
applied
Yeah.
to these things, but it's still, it's tracking the information and its life cycle over time is good. I mean, essentially an unsolved problem
Yeah.
because you solve it today, it's going to change tomorrow, right?
How much is legacy storage? And when I say that, older
Hmm.
kind of storage, or it's not even that, it's going to be older techniques, older ways of managing. When you go out and talk to all the customers that you do, how often do you go into an environment and just go, oh wow, okay, this is something that we can fix really easily? But how
Yeah,
much of that is plaguing as well the ability for databases to move forward
sure.
and add value?
So I think let's look at it in two dimensions.
Yeah.
I think when we look at performance,
Hmm.
right? People think that direct attached storage is kind of the fastest that
Yeah,
can
yeah,
possibly
yeah.
exist, which in some respects is true, right? But at scale, the economics of running those kind of environments fall down, especially in an enterprise, right? Where you have personnel constraints. You don't want to be in the data center changing 10,000 hard drives on a weekend.
Never.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, the way that we do things is Pure with how we, cultivate flash over time and how we kind of provide that enterprise grade storage device helps attack that problem, right? That demand or that complexity. But like on the tin, it doesn't look like it's complex
Hmm.
to run DAS,
Right.
but in
Right.
operations it is, right? And then we look at kind of shared storage environments where we have injected complexity because of legacy architectures that are extraordinarily challenging. And we talk about the 15 architectural decisions for Pure attacking each one of those kind of those legacy architectural decisions that make things hard for an enterprise to run a storage array. It's hard to believe, like in an enterprise, I can plug a box in like a flash array and just provision a volume and get the entire performance capacity of the device without having to do any tuning. And that's true,
Yeah.
right? And we have proof points like all over the place with that.
Well, that's a good callback, right? Because when we publish this, we'll have finished our 15 architectural decision series. So,
Ah,
viewer, listener out there, that series is published on YouTube where you're going to find this. So, if you do want to go back into, okay, what does realistic efficiency metrics mean? I'm sure at some point we'll talk about snapshots here as well and what those mean.
right.
But people can go back and check out those 15 architectural decisions because they matter. And they
Yes.
matter at the context of storage, but they also matter at the context of the individuals that rely upon the storage to do
Correct.
their jobs, which is our database administrators.
Okay.
Okay, what are our DBAs contending with right now? What is burning
Ooh.
them out? What do they go to bed at night worrying about?
Let's see. I think honestly, the way you're talking about snapshots, right?
Sure,
Honestly,
sure.
recovering the business is
Okay.
probably number one. Performance is obviously going to be on that list of things to
Mhm.
do. I think we have many customers that I've talked to that just they have some of the largest databases on the planet, and they just don't back them up.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And like, right?
Thanks.
And so being able to successfully provide solutions for customers like that is very gratifying for someone like me and obviously the company. Um, and so whether it be running native backups or RMAN dumps or leveraging snapshots for instantaneous recovery, but we have the tools to attack that problem directly. And then obviously the simplicity angle, right?
Sure.
Again, going up into the data tier, the DBA has to care less about how data is placed on storage. I said care less, not care, not
Yeah,
care,
not
right?
not care.
There's
Not
still
not.
right. There's still
Yeah,
best practices
that's
and
right.
things like that.
That's right.
But I think kind of that simplicity, definitely the availability we talked about with NDU and things like that, data protection, all those that whole umbrella, the slide that you were talking
Right.
about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I used to work with a former data architect here who
Mhm.
his big line was DBAs care the most about exposure.
Yeah,
Right. That was his cool line. I said,
right.
"Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean, George, about exposure?" He said, "They just don't want to be in a situation where the problem is them. Like they don't want to be getting that phone
Oh, yeah.
call." And so it's like if you can come to me with something that helps limit or decrease or eliminate my exposure,
Right,
right? Think about not backing, these enterprise companies not backing things
right.
up. Oh my gosh, that's total exposure, right? Where if
Exactly.
somebody hits an oops or deletes a volume or whatever,
Yeah.
that's an oops, and then there's huge exposure.
Yeah, and I think the platform as a whole attacks that problem of
Yeah.
risk,
Hmm.
right? And be able to build systems that reduce or de-risk an environment, right? Again, availability, data protection, performance, kind of the core tenets there.
Yeah.
And being able to, when I talk to customers or I teach internally, I talk about things like, and it's not even risk of what's happening in a failure of the platform. I've worked in third party software environments where the vendor slides a script across the table and says, run this.
Yeah.
That's your upgrade. Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
how's that going to work?
Right. And
Right.
so obviously we go and test it, right? And it
Sure.
works
Sure.
great in dev and test, and we do it in prod and something goes wrong. Right. And so, one of the things I tell customers a lot is imagine going to your change management for that upgrade and say your rollback time for a failed upgrade is instant,
Yeah.
not as long as it takes,
Yeah.
which would be kind of the legacy way of viewing that. Like, you talk about the worst case scenario for a DBA or not wanting to have the light shine on them is when you have the CIO or CTO over your shoulder saying, hey, how long is it going to take for that database to restore? As long as it takes,
Right.
right? That's not a situation that you want to be in. And being able to provide a restore capability of instant is extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's massive, and
Yeah.
we've done a lot of that over time, investing and making sure that is a capability. Um, what's going on with the database landscape, right? We talked a little about SQL Server. I know Oracle's kind of out there. You've got some open source things. Yeah, you're making that face,
Right.
around that. But what are you seeing? What are companies adopting? What are they using? Is there anything new, or
Okay.
is it kind of there's the relational side, and the
Sure.
large enterprises are generally very invested, in that space, or is there kind of a change in afoot in what they're looking at?
Okay. I'm taking a couple of notes. I'll unpack a couple of things. So
Yes.
one of the things I am seeing actually that I really like is an increase adoption in snapshots.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So in SQL Server 2022, there was a T-SQL snapshot backup feature, which I may or may not have blogged about a whole bunch of times, right? And what that did is it gave the ability to take an application consistent snapshot of a database, but at the control of the DBA,
Hmm.
right? Which is pretty cool. Um, and that was 3 years ago. And now what we're seeing is it's really starting to pop up in production environments now because people are lifecycle in their systems and they're moving forward with their version of SQL Server to take advantage of that capability. And as much as we talk about snapshots, watching the adoption increase finally
Yeah.
is super exciting for me because I know the value that it can provide back to a business. Because I can take a database, whether it's 10 kilobytes or 10 terabytes, and it takes the same amount of time to restore on our platform, which is amazing, right?
But it's not also a restore. I mean, there's other reasons to use snapshots, right? If we're getting into
Oh yeah,
the non-prod and the
sure,
dev and the test and all that
yeah,
as well, right? I mean, there's multiple use cases that can
yeah.
be beneficial.
I mean, I can build an availability group replica from a snapshot,
For sure.
which I've spent many a weekend waiting for those things to restore so that I can get back to like not worrying about my system being in a failed state.
Right.
Restore the availability group, go, right? Same thing with DataGuard and MySQL and Postgres. We can leverage it across that technique across those different data stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Do we have to talk about vector now? I think we
Yeah,
do.
I think, well, we've
Yeah.
been holding off. I think
Okay.
this is the part, you've really wanted to get into. Let's talk about Vector. Let's go.
Yeah.
What's going on in Vector?
Yeah, because you asked like what's emerging,
Well, yeah,
right?
and that's
Yeah.
where, I want to get to, okay, these are the things that people know, but then what is coming out that's hot and
Sure.
fresh? Because you were also, again, you mentioned that earlier. You were talking about that at Accelerate
Hmm.
as part of one of the, it was important enough that we dedicated an entire breakout to it,
Thank you.
right?
Okay, I thought it was just me. No, so we have been super fortunate as Pure to be part of the early access program for SQL Server 2025, right, which introduced the vector data type into the relational database engine. Oracle 23 AI has also the same feature or similar feature. I want to say the same
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
and what that really brings to the party for an application architect is kind of to have the ability to do semantic or similarity search of data that's inside of a relational database. Imagine just being able to ask a natural language question of a database and it's going to give you the answer,
Hmm.
right? I can have a chat bot like experience or an agentic experience, because you have to talk about that now, with my data that's in my database, which is extraordinarily powerful to an application architect.
Kind of blows me away,
Yeah.
actually. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's super cool, to be very technically accurate, how both Oracle and Microsoft kind of dovetailed this capability into an existing enterprise database, right? Rather than, and I think operationally, there's a whole bunch of things that matter around that, because as a DBA, I don't have to go learn a new platform and
Sure.
get a new backup infrastructure. My developers don't have to learn a new programming language. I basically add this data structure to the database, and I can just go and start to get the outcomes that the business needs without a huge lift, right? And I think that's why we'll see a pretty good adoption of vector in enterprise data stores. And I think like the Milvises and the Pinecones of the world are still going to exist.
Yeah.
I think kind of more tactical solutions, but these databases have been running our businesses for 30, 40, 50 years, and that's where that data lives, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have to move it and lift it to another environment with a different security requirements,
Or
right?
get some other kind of software platform or bolt something else
Exactly.
on or do some kind of complicated migration. It's
100%.
just adapting the newest version and then taking on that new functionality that drives that efficiency.
Exactly. And we've had some really great fun with a lot of my counterparts at work, like Andrew Silliphant, Andrew Prusky, and Andy Yoon, like all A's apparently, and Anthony. That's it. Why do we have anybody without an A in the database team? Go
I
figure.
don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
All right. But being in the lab and actually getting to kick the tires and really find, the limits of what these data stores can do, because our platforms, have the performance capacity to really drive these systems that are limits. And it's been fantastic to work with engineering to go and solve some interesting problems.
So, what does this do then to the DBA role and function, which we
Hmm.
know about every 4 or 5 years with the major feature releases that come out in the databases
Yeah.
that certain things change. I remember, back in my Oracle days, there were more things around automation or
Sure.
things that were cloud connected. Now you're
Hmm.
talking about these agentic kind of functions going in, and obviously we've got CI/CD pipelines, and
Hmm.
we've got Kubernetes things going on, and you got platform engineering. So does the DBA then start learning these other areas? Do they intersect? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the traditional DBA,
Hmm.
I think the cloud has
Yeah,
become definitely a
yeah,
part of their everyday life. Automation and APIs and PowerShell and Python has become
yep,
part of their everyday life, right? And I think people tie their careers to systems. I'm an Oracle person. I'm a SQL Server person. I'm MySQL person, whatever that is. But really, we're data people. We're in charge of cultivating the most important asset for our company and protecting it. And I think as DBAs, we're going to pivot and change towards the technologies and the capabilities to do that job still. Are we going to have agentic interactions with our data? Probably. Are we going to? I built an MCP bot last week,
yeah.
or MCP server for a platform I'm working on. I just started asking questions, and I was pretty impressed by the outcomes. But there needs to be some guardrails around those kind of things, and us as DBAs and practitioners are going to be the ones that define those guardrails, right?
So then what does automation then do? And I know this is another area you've been spending a lot of time with, and we'll
Sure.
just come right out with there, right? We're, Pure's working and pushing something out to our
Hmm.
customers around Fusion, around policy driven
Sure.
automation. And so again, there's a connection in with this area as well and an
Yep.
impact that it'll have. But what's been getting you excited about that area when we look at presets and
Sure.
some of the workload driven things that you can do in that space?
Yeah. So what happened about 2 weeks ago is our REST API is now integrated with Fusion, so I
Okay.
can do all of the things that I'd want to do in terms of interacting with Fusion programmatically. That then became part of our PowerShell module and also our Python module. And so I immediately grabbed the PowerShell module and went to work,
Yep.
right? And I defined, with the preset, which is kind of a template of what a SQL server should look like inside of Fusion or inside a fleet of Pure Storage arrays. And so I went and I added a performance capacity limit, like QoS policy,
Sure.
right? And put much like a cloud, we want to have a boundary around the performance profile of different types of database servers. I went through and I added a protection group snapshot policy because I want to define, like, I want to protect this data at this interval and retain it for this long and replicate it to this other device. And you could do that all in code and have that template. And then I can create multiple workloads almost instantly from that template, and everything will be standard. And I can also measure any skew from the template, which again provides a lot of value to me because I basically now have storage policy based management at my fingertips, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
big fun.
It sounds hugely fun, but also almost limitless, right? I mean, when we start empowering our customers to set these things up the way they want to set them, or
Right.
when enough presets and these templates, as you say, start
Hmm.
being shared around,
Yes.
everybody's going to be able to take advantage of this workload orchestration capability that then gets automated and
Yes.
again sort of simplifies the day-to-day tasks and let you focus more on the business, as we
Yeah.
always are kind of want to say, right?
Yeah. And there's one hidden gem actually
Yeah.
inside of how Fusion works as a whole. And I worked with it again. It's only been about 2 weeks since the
Yeah.
PowerShell module was
Yeah.
released, and last week I went and I added a volume to a workload, right, and instantiated a copy of the template, right, and that's up and running in the system. And I added a volume to it, and what it did is it automatically added that volume to the protection group, which in the database space is extraordinarily important because what the last thing I want to have happen is have a database span 2 or 3 volumes and not have it cover the fourth volume
Right.
because I added that later and I forgot to add it back to the protection group. And so now that's done automatically for you. You're really providing a lot of value around the platform to not let you, do the wrong thing, right?
So what's your advice then for teams that need to work together
Hmm.
around this, right? There's kind of a, I don't know, going back to my Wayback Machine, there was a, storage people are from Venus and database people are from Mars thing that we
Quite
that we
literally why I
did.
have a job,
There's
Rob.
I
Is
know,
this
I
is
know,
to bridge this
I know,
gap.
to bridge this gap. And so you've got to bridge that gap because you have, those two roles,
Yeah,
but we have the app side, we have the app owners, we've got the development team.
sure.
So how do they all partner up and figure out a way to use this incredible
Sure.
new technology around automation to make it work?
Yeah, I think you're kind of leaning towards like the secure multi-tenancy part of the conversation.
Could
I
be.
think, yeah,
Yeah, it could,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I think that as a company, we realize that we have to be able to provide for all the personas that you just described.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at like cloud infrastructures and private clouds, they've tried to solve that problem, and so taking those techniques and applying them to our platform, and so now with things like secure multi-tenancy, we can provide that level of access and control to the storage administrator to provide developers and DBAs kind of their own place inside of the platform that's maybe potentially away from production to leverage or to interact with the platform potentially programmatically in a safer way,
Hmm.
right? Adding those boundaries to those different personas because honestly, I don't necessarily want to have access to
No.
the prod volumes that
Right.
support
Right.
the production database systems, but I want to observe them. I want to have read-only access to know what the performance profile is, but I maybe when I do want to do dev test stuff over here in the corner and destroy volumes and not, potentially do something bad in code that affects production, right? So that being able to draw those lines in a concrete way, super valuable.
Yeah. Visibility, observability, opening up capabilities, right?
One of my favorite topics, observability.
Observe. I know.
Yeah.
I know you love that one.
I just like the charts and the little like the things,
Well,
blinking lights.
charts and graphs and blinking light. I mean, people still love blinky lights. I mean, think about the hardware that we put out at
Right.
Accelerate, right? That everybody's excited there. Hit on, and again, you talk tons of
Sure.
customers. We came out in a big way in June at Accelerate,
Hmm.
and certainly in New York, continued with the company's vision around enterprise data cloud,
Right.
enabled by the Pure platform, right?
Hmm.
This set of capabilities, right?
Right.
That we deliver to customers. Conceptually thinking about that, how do you see those connecting to what you're driving every day
Yeah.
at a database solutions level for
Sure.
storage?
Yeah, and I think when we look at the concepts behind EDC or Enterprise Data Cloud, I think the conversation that we just had around Fusion and secure
Yep.
multi-tenancy, really that's the implementation
Hmm.
of that vision, right? And turning that into actual code, and going through with presets and workloads, really defining what good looks like in a platform, but also leveraging things like Pure One to help me decide where I'm going to place workloads in my environment. Do I need to move a workload off of an array that's too high? Where do I move it to? And so being able to provide that autonomy to the system is I think really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's super exciting. And with some of the other things that are going on in Pure One as well, right? With the Copilot capabilities and,
Yes.
you get to see what happens when we have been capturing trillions of data points from our customers' arrays over years, and then what we can go and do and innovate
I think we've passed
around that.
trillions and gone to gazillions.
Have we gone to
Yeah,
gazillions?
gazillions, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's very possible. I just go back to the marketing around the meta stuff from 2017, and I still remember the graphic and the trillions of data points there. Let's go from EDC and the platform to actually some of the specifics in the platform,
Sure.
because at the end of the day, we still do solve customer problems with storage
Yes.
that we deliver either as a subscription or right on-prem.
Yep.
Really exciting new rev across pretty much the
Everything.
entire
Yeah.
portfolio, right? And
Exciting
again, I
times.
know those run about every 18 to 24 months, and
Right.
they're generally driven by the microprocessor dev cycles, but that's not
Mhm.
the only reason. There are things that we can innovate around and tweak. You've got the new versions of Excel,
Yep.
which now you see a lot of the enterprise adoption in comparison to some of the kind of clunkier older things that might be out there. New Rev of X
Yes.
of C. ST I think is interesting as well when you look at some of the quant based things for high performance edge cases. But
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, walk everybody through from your
My
lens.
lens.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
lens. What those look like from the portfolio standpoint.
Sure. So it's been pretty cool. I've been at Pure for about 4 years. I
Okay.
think I was hired right when the first Excel launched, right? Quite literally, I think 2 months after I was hired, maybe 3 months after I was hired, it went GA. But now I'm on my second lap, right? And so we have a new Excel, and we did a bunch of comparative analysis of the old Excel and the new Excel, and we produced a bunch of metrics around that, and really increasing the performance density of the Excel platform by 3 times.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable. If you think about just the technology innovations to get to be able to produce effectively the same device. It's the same like similar chassis and similar architecture, but being able to iterate and still provide a 3x increase in performance, right? We look at the inside of the box and the things that we iterate on, like the CPUs and PCI Express and all that different stuff, and driving the outcomes with that, and providing a performance profile that honestly is the best way to describe crazy.
Well, people don't know that that's hard,
It's
right?
very
Like
hard.
when you build the array, and I say it's difficult for 2 things because you have space considerations
Correct.
and you have power and cooling
Mhm.
considerations, right?
Right.
So if you're driving more horsepower, you got to have a heat and cooling envelope that you can meet. So
Right.
so driving that much more performance and density in the same
Yes.
package
Yep.
is actually really difficult. And we may underplay that a little bit. I want to point that out and
Yeah.
let our engineers know that we know that's really hard.
It's
what you
very
do.
hard. Yeah. And it's impressive. Again, being able to iterate on something and provide a 3x improvement. And being able to, as an existing customer, I pull out
Just
a controller, I
Right.
stick in a new controller, and I immediately reap those benefits.
Yeah.
Right. And in a non-disruptive way. And so that, again, back to the value of the platform is amazing.
Super cool. All
Yeah.
right, we're gonna hit our hot takes
Okay.
segment. I think you got to do this with me one other time. So these are
Uh-oh.
kind of fun and put you on the hot seat.
All right.
They also end up being really good for YouTube Shorts. So that's a big benefit, right?
Man,
Little
I
pithy
don't know if I want
statements,
to wind
right?
up on YouTube.
I
That's
don't know.
right.
I don't know. It's a hard thing. Okay, so number one I got
Sure.
set up is so what is a task that somebody that's a DBA or working in infrastructure that you think never ever again should have to be done manually in
Manually?
2025? Yeah.
Uh,
What's a manual thing that stands out where if you went into an environment and saw somebody doing it, you go, "What are you doing? Why are you
honestly,
still doing that?"
provisioning any sort of server by hand. It
Okay.
should be done in code.
All in code.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is code.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
Why?
I'll say this. I spent the beginning part of my career, I had spreadsheets of how to build SQL servers step by step, a little checklist. I'd get ready, I'd install a bunch of new SQL servers for whatever project it is I'm working on, and I'd come back 3 weeks later, 3 months later, and I'd miss that step, I missed that step, and I come back and I say, "Who installed this?" And I go back to the change log, "Oh, that was me."
That was you.
Right.
Congratulations.
That doesn't happen when you write the code to deploy the thing.
Yeah.
Right. We talked earlier about presets. Using a preset, I can define, small, medium, large t-shirt sizes of my database servers. I
Love it.
can then provision those, and I know they're going to have snapshot policies associated with them. I know they're going to have the performance profile that's needed for the system that's being deployed, and I'm not going to miss, a checkbox in a setting because it's just going to happen, and it's going to happen in code, and that's why.
Or
That's
if you
why.
want to tweak something, you can go back in really easily and do it.
Yeah.
It's not a whole manual provisioning type of task.
Exactly, and then
Yeah.
you commit that change back to your repo, and you have an artifact of what changed over time too.
Boom.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yep.
Okay, number 2. You passed number 1.
I passed. Okay,
Passed.
check.
You passed.
Is it
All
check?
right.
Is it check plus?
Yes.
Okay.
Check. An S plus. Saddest remember the grading? My wife's first grade
yeah.
teacher. She deals in N's and E's and S's and all that, I think.
Right.
Okay, number 2. Anthony's been given a magic wand.
Okay.
You got a magic wand, and you get to fix one thing in database environments today? One thing in database environments.
Let's see. I think like I could fix like all the databases on the planet. Is that the question? Yeah.
Go with it where I'm intrigued. Like, you have a very
Okay.
creative mind. I want to see where you
It's
go.
actually a simple answer.
Yeah.
I wish everyone's databases are backed up. That's it. Simple as that. Right.
I think that, I mean, again, the question said database environments.
Yeah.
That's one giant environment, and you're basically just saying, hey, just back it up, please.
Just yes, protect the data, back it up, snapshot it, whatever technique is appropriate for your recovery objective. Because I want everyone to stay happy and employed. I want all the businesses to stay up and running. That's the outcome that I want there.
Yeah, well, and that's another segment I've done on other episodes of the tell us about your oops, your infrastructure confession or storage confession.
Oh, I have a bunch of those.
Right?
Yeah?
I know,
Right.
I know, and that's usually over fine frothy adult beverages that we
Sure.
get to do those. Okay, number 3.
Yes.
What is a common myth about DBAs or infrastructure teams, IT
Mhm.
teams, if you wish, that you want to debunk today? Anthony, the Mythbuster. What's a myth?
I want to challenge folks, actually.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That's okay.
We talked about the adoption of snapshots in SQL Server 2022. I want people to continue to invest in that technology.
Okay.
Not because I work here, but because I know the outcome that it can provide for a business.
Yeah.
Right. 10 kilobytes, 10 terabytes, you can restore in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing about our snapshots backups, but they're not. They may or may not be, however you want to view that, but they are really fast restores.
Are snapshots backups? No,
That's
a
a
whole
whole
nother
other
episode.
show.
It's another show that
I wrote a
think
whole conference session on
we've
that
done.
topic.
No, I think we ran it. I think we ran it last year, the year before, and it
Oh,
was
yeah, that's
really
right.
great.
We
We
did.
ran it. It was really good. It was really good. Okay, so per Anthony, just back up your databases, please. Would
Yeah.
you back things up
And try snapshots.
and then try snapshots? Yeah. No, it was, and I think people have been non sequitur, but
Yeah.
I think it was at the Oracle show I went to like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
And it was a DBA guy who came by, and he was using another vendor's storage, but it was 10-year-old stuff, and
Yep.
he's like, oh, snapshots. Well, why would I?
Yeah.
And so there is some element of, if you haven't used
recently
snapshots, what
Yes.
Andrew Miller says, our snapshots are what snapshots wanted to be when they grew up.
Right.
That's kind of his line that you can see in the 15 Architectural Decisions series.
Yeah, I have a whole slide from that our snapshots backup conference presentation you're referring to that goes through that, like all the different types of snapshots and all the different pain points associated with them over time, and how kind of the modern implementation of that has addressed all of those problems. On our platform, in SQL Server, I can take an application consistent snapshot in 100 milliseconds every time.
Yeah.
Right. And that's in the implementation for SQL Server, it's a write freeze. It's not even a whole database freeze. So I can still read from the database. I think most applications can take 100 milliseconds of latency for 100 milliseconds. Right.
So let's sum it up here. We've
Okay.
talked about a ton of things
Yeah.
for a lot of different audiences relative to databases, but maybe go back to some of the core benefits, the core outcomes, right, that you want to talk about, just to put a bow on this whole thing.
Sure.
About what we care about solving for customers that are experiencing database challenges.
Yeah, 100%. So I think looking at, we talked about the iteration of the platform.
Yeah.
Like we're bringing a whole bunch of new capacity in many different ways to the data landscape, X, XL, ST, FlashBlade iterations, and all of those different ways that we can produce and consume data. Extraordinarily valuable, right?
Yeah.
The data protection story, right? We have innovations around different capabilities to be able to provide customers the ability to protect data and reduce operational friction, right? Being able to get 8 weekends back a year.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. And so all of those different stories, I think the biggest thing that we do is we help make kind of the management of these complex systems easier. I'm going to say systems, kind of collective application systems in a data center, right? And just so we can focus on kind of higher level challenges in our business.
Yeah, I love it.
Cool.
Way to put a bow on it.
Love it.
And for people that want to talk to our experts, I will promote that we are going to be at the Oracle AI World Show, the artist formerly I was going there. The artist formerly known as Oracle Cloud World recently. So super exciting. We go to this one every year
So
in
it really
Vegas.
means that the cloud is passe, would you say?
Well, I don't know. Is
Yeah.
open passe? I mean, it was open world for a while, but super exciting. We
Yes.
love going to this show. It's a chance for us to bring out our experts to showcase all the things that you've been talking about. We'll have our Oracle experts Ron Eakins and Graham Thornton
Yes.
there delivering a session. So if you are going, please take a moment to stop by the booth, chat with our folks there on the team, particularly if a lot of these things you've heard about today are interesting. We'd be happy to go in depth, set up a customer meeting as well with your account team, and we can get folks out for you. So that is my plug around that. And of course, as with these episodes that we're publishing, we want your storage confessions. Send it to purereport@purestorage.com. If there is something you have messed up, and maybe it's not storage, maybe it was IT, maybe it was earlier in your career, send that in to us and we'll be sharing those stories on future episodes.
Love it.
Hey man, this was a lot of fun.
Super fun.
It's always easy with you. We just get rolling
Likewise.
And just go and thank you for your passion in this space. I know it's only been 4 years, but seeing where we were 4 years ago and just all the, you're always kind of pushing the boundaries, right? It's in the Kubernetes space and then the AI space. And now, with Fusion and using those foundational tools and not just you, but the entire team, you guys are so passionate about what you do in the database area for Pure, and we love it. So
thank you. And we just love having the opportunity to do these things, like work with you and the team on this, and also just work with the internal teams on producing that content. It's so much fun to be able to have just those opportunities. So thank you.
Yeah, cutting edge stuff. Well, and thank you, Anthony, and thank you for watching this episode of the Pure Report podcast. As always, we say tell a friend, tell a colleague, and we'll keep the great guests like Mr. Anthony coming on to the program. Please do come see us at Oracle AI World. It is still weird saying that, but thank you again. With that, we will wrap for Pure Storage and Anthony Nocentino. This is Rob Ludman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.